Before Cleopatra became a legend, she was a queen fighting to keep her kingdom alive. History remembers her as a woman of impossible beauty, a seductress who conquered the hearts of powerful Roman men, a queen carried through candlelit palaces in clouds of perfume and gold. But much of that image was created after a defeat. It was shaped by enemies who needed Rome to believe that Cleopatra was not a capable ruler, but a dangerous foreign enchantress. The real Cleopatra was more complicated. She was highly educated, politically ambitious, fluent in the language of power. She understood ceremony, religion, finance, diplomacy, and war. She ruled a kingdom that was rich, ancient, and increasingly trapped beneath the shadow of Rome. She did not control an empire large enough to defeat Rome by force. So she used what remained available to her: intelligence, wealth, language, political theater, dynastic marriage, military alliances, and personal relationships with two of the most powerful men of the Roman age, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Those relationships would make her famous. They would also help destroy her. But Cleopatra's story was never simply a romance. It was a struggle for survival, a struggle between Egypt and Rome, between an ancient kingdom and a rising Mediterranean power, between a queen determined to preserve her dynasty and a Roman statesman determined to rule the world. Cleopatra would survive a civil war, return from exile, restore her throne, give birth to the son she presented as Caesar's child, rebuild Egypt's power, create an Eastern alliance with Mark Antony, and challenge the man who would become Rome's first emperor. For nearly 22 years, she remained on the throne. Then, in the summer of 30 BC, everything ended. Her kingdom fell. Her lover died. Her son was hunted. And Cleopatra chose death rather than appear as a captive in a Roman triumph. This is the story of Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt, the queen who stood between the ancient world and the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC, probably in Alexandria. Alexandria was unlike any other city in Egypt. It stood beside the Mediterranean Sea, looking north toward the wider Greek and Roman world. It had been founded by Alexander the Great more than 2.5 centuries earlier. After Alexander's death, his enormous empire was divided among his generals. One of them, Ptolemy, took Egypt. He established a dynasty that would rule the country until Cleopatra's death. The Ptolemies were not originally Egyptian. They were Macedonian Greeks. They spoke Greek at court. They governed from Alexandria. They married within their own family to preserve dynastic authority. But they also ruled as Egyptian pharaohs. In temples across the Nile Valley, they appeared in traditional Egyptian form. They offered gifts to the gods. They wore the crowns of ancient kings. They presented themselves as heirs to a civilization already thousands of years old. The Ptolemaic kingdom was therefore a world of two identities: Greek and Egyptian, Mediterranean and African, Alexandrian and Pharaonic. Cleopatra would learn to use both. Her father was Ptolemy XII, often called Auletes, meaning the flute player. He was not a strong king. His claim to the throne was uncertain. His government was unpopular, and his survival depended heavily on Roman support. Rome had not yet become an empire ruled by one emperor. It was still officially a republic, but it was a republic dominated by generals, aristocrats, enormous wealth, and violent political competition. Roman influence had spread across the Mediterranean. Kingdoms that once acted independently were increasingly forced to seek Roman approval. Egypt remained formally free, but its freedom was becoming fragile. Ptolemy XII understood this. He spent heavily to secure Roman friendship. He borrowed money. He cultivated powerful Roman politicians. He tried to make himself useful to the Republic. The cost of this policy fell upon Egypt. Taxes rose. Resentment grew. When Rome annexed Cyprus, which was ruled by another member of the Ptolemaic family, Ptolemy failed to resist. In 58 BCE, opposition in Alexandria forced him from the kingdom. He fled to Rome. Cleopatra was still young. We do not know exactly how much she witnessed, but she grew up in a royal family where power could disappear overnight. A king could be driven from his palace. A sister could claim the throne. A foreign army could decide who ruled Egypt. During her father's absence, Cleopatra's sister Berenice IV became queen. Ptolemy eventually secured Roman military assistance. In 55 BCE, he returned to Egypt with an army commanded by the Roman general Aulus Gabinius. Berenice was executed. Ptolemy recovered his throne. But the lesson was clear. The Ptolemaic dynasty now ruled with Rome standing behind it. Cleopatra entered adulthood knowing that Egypt could not ignore Roman politics. The kingdom's future depended upon understanding Rome better than Rome understood Egypt. Unlike many members of her dynasty, Cleopatra appears to have learned the Egyptian language. Ancient writers credited her with knowledge of several languages and praised the flexibility of her voice and conversation. It is impossible to verify every language later authors claimed she spoke, but the broader picture is believable. She was an educated queen prepared to communicate with diplomats and subjects from many regions. Her intelligence mattered more than the beauty that later legends would emphasize. Even the ancient writer Plutarch, who lived more than a century after Cleopatra, did not describe her appearance as uniquely perfect. He emphasized her presence, her conversation, her voice, her ability to make an impression. Cleopatra's power was not simply how she looked. It was how she entered a room, how she listened, how she spoke, how she presented herself, and how quickly she understood what another person wanted. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra inherited a troubled kingdom. She was about 18 years old. According to her father's arrangements, she was expected to rule with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. He was probably around 10. In accordance with Ptolemaic dynastic custom, they were presented as a royal pair. But Cleopatra did not intend to remain a decorative partner. Early official documents suggest that she tried to place herself at the center of government. Her name sometimes appeared before her brothers. Her image appeared on coinage. She acted with the confidence of a sole ruler. This created enemies within the palace. Ptolemy XIII was young, but the men around him were powerful. Among them were the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achillas, and the teacher Theodotus. They governed through the boy king and resisted Cleopatra's authority. Egypt was also facing serious problems. The Nile floods had been poor. Food supplies were under pressure. Debt remained heavy. Roman influence continued. The court divided into rival factions. By 49 BCE, Cleopatra had lost control of Alexandria. She fled east, probably into Syria and the region of the southern Levant. For the first time, the young queen was in exile. But exile did not end her reign. She gathered supporters. She raised an army. She prepared to return. Cleopatra understood that a throne surrendered willingly would never be restored. While Egypt moved toward civil war, Rome was already consumed by one of its own. Two of the Republic's greatest figures had become enemies. Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, known as Pompey the Great, and Gaius Julius Caesar. Pompey had once been one of Rome's most successful generals. Caesar had conquered Gaul and built an army devoted to him. Their rivalry shattered the political order. In 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his troops. Civil war began. Pompey was defeated at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC. He fled across the Mediterranean seeking safety. Egypt seemed like a logical refuge. Ptolemy XIII's family had benefited from Pompey's influence, but the advisors around the young king feared Caesar. They made a brutal calculation. When Pompey reached the Egyptian coast near Pelusium, he was invited into a small boat. There he was murdered. His severed head was presented to Caesar when the Roman general arrived in Alexandria. The Egyptian court expected gratitude. Instead, Caesar reportedly reacted with anger and disgust. Whether this response was entirely sincere or partly political, Pompey's murder gave Caesar a reason to intervene. He entered Alexandria with a relatively small force. He announced that he would settle the dispute between Cleopatra and her brother. For Cleopatra, Caesar's arrival created both danger and opportunity. If he supported Ptolemy, her cause might be finished. If she could reach him first, she might regain everything. Later tradition describes her secret entrance into Caesar's quarters. According to the famous story, she was wrapped inside a carpet and carried into the palace. The oldest version more likely describes a sack used for bedding rather than a roll carpet. The exact detail is uncertain, but the central point is credible. Cleopatra found a way to enter the royal palace secretly and meet Caesar before her enemies could stop her. She was about 21. Caesar was in his early 50s. He was one of the most experienced politicians and commanders in the Roman world. Cleopatra needed his military authority. Caesar needed a stable Egypt capable of paying its debts and supplying grain. Their relationship quickly became political and personal. The Roman sources would later turn their meeting into a tale of seduction. But Cleopatra brought more than charm. She brought a legal claim to the throne, an understanding of Egyptian government, access to royal wealth, and a willingness to align Egypt with Caesar's future. Caesar announced that Cleopatra and Ptolemy should return to joint rule according to their father's wishes. The faction supporting Ptolemy refused to accept this settlement. Fighting began in Alexandria. The conflict known as the Alexandrian War trapped Caesar inside part of the city. Achilles brought the Egyptian army against him. The palace district became a fortress. Ships burned in the harbor. Ancient accounts later connected this fire with damage to books stored near the harbor, although the scale of destruction and its relationship to the famous Library of Alexandria remain uncertain. The struggle was dangerous. Caesar did not begin with enough soldiers to control the entire city. Cleopatra remained with him through the siege. Her younger sister Arsinoe escaped from the palace and joined the Egyptian forces. For a time, Arsinoe was proclaimed queen by Caesar's enemies. The royal family had divided again. Brother against sister. Sister against sister. Each side claimed to defend Egypt. Roman reinforcements eventually arrived. In early 47 BC, Caesar defeated the forces supporting Ptolemy XIII. The young king died during the retreat, probably drowning in the Nile when his boat overturned. Cleopatra's rival was gone. Caesar restored her to the throne. But Ptolemaic tradition still favored a male co-ruler. Cleopatra was therefore paired with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. In practice, she was now the dominant monarch. Later in 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. He was named Ptolemy Caesar. He became widely known as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. Cleopatra presented him as the son of Julius Caesar. Many contemporaries appear to have accepted that claim. Caesar himself never formally made Caesarion his Roman heir. Roman law, politics, and Caesar's existing family connections made the question dangerous. But for Cleopatra, the boy had enormous symbolic importance. He joined the bloodline of the Ptolemies with the name of Rome's most powerful man. If recognized, Caesarion could become more than a prince of Egypt. He could become the center of a new Mediterranean dynasty. Cleopatra had regained her throne, but she had also tied her future to Caesar. This alliance brought advantages. Caesar restored Cyprus to Egyptian control. Cleopatra's government gained stability. Her authority was strengthened by Roman support. Yet the arrangement also reminded everyone that Egypt's queen had returned because a Roman commander chose to support her. Cleopatra now had to turn that dependence into power. In 46 BCE, she traveled to Rome. She remained there for an extended period, probably living in one of Caesar's properties across the Tiber River. Her presence caused fascination and unease. Rome was not accustomed to seeing a foreign queen living near its political center. Cleopatra arrived not as a defeated captive, but as an allied monarch. She brought Caesarion. She brought a royal court. She represented the wealth and ancient prestige of Egypt. Caesar placed a statue of Cleopatra in the temple of Venus Genetrix, the divine ancestor claimed by his family. To some Romans, this was an extraordinary honor. To others, it was deeply disturbing. Caesar was already accumulating powers that seemed increasingly monarchical. He accepted honors. His image appeared on coins. He held dictatorship for an extended term and then for life. Rumors spread that he intended to become a king. Cleopatra's presence added to those fears. Rome had expelled its king centuries earlier. The word king remained politically poisonous. A Roman ruler allied with an Eastern queen and fathering a royal child looked dangerously close to monarchy. On the 15th of March, 44 BCE, Caesar was assassinated inside a meeting of the Roman Senate. A group of senators stabbed him to death. They claimed they were saving the Republic. Cleopatra was suddenly exposed. Her protector was gone. Rome descended into another civil war. She returned to Egypt. Soon afterward, Ptolemy XIV disappeared from the record and died. Ancient and modern writers have often suspected that Cleopatra arranged his death, possibly by poisoning. But this cannot be proven. Whatever the cause, Cleopatra replaced him with Caesarion. The boy became Ptolemy XV and her official co-ruler. Cleopatra now governed in the name of herself and her son. Her position was stronger than it had been in 51 BCE. She controlled Egypt directly. She had removed or survived her dynastic rivals. She had learned how Roman power operated. And she possessed something no other Eastern ruler could claim: a child presented as the son of Julius Caesar. But Caesar's death had created new masters in Rome. His assassins, led by Brutus and Cassius, fought against the men who claimed to avenge him. The most important of those men were Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate. Mark Antony had been one of Caesar's closest political allies. He was a skilled soldier an experienced commander, and a charismatic public figure. Octavian was Caesar's adopted heir. He was young, physically less imposing, and initially underestimated. But Octavian possessed patience, discipline, and an extraordinary instinct for political survival. Antony and Octavian defeated Caesar's assassins at Philippi in 42 BCE. Afterward, they divided much of the Roman world between them. Antony took responsibility for the eastern provinces. The East was wealthy, complex, and essential to Roman strategy. It also placed Antony close to Egypt. In 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him at Tarsus in Cilicia. He wanted answers. During the war against Caesar's assassins, Cleopatra's support had been questioned. Antony also needed money, ships, and supplies for his planned campaigns. Cleopatra could not afford to ignore him, but she did not arrive like a frightened subject. According to Plutarch's later account, she sailed up the river in a magnificent vessel. Its stern glittered with gold. Purple sails moved above the water. Music accompanied the journey. Cleopatra appeared in the form of the goddess Aphrodite, while attendants represented figures from mythology. The description may have been embellished over time, but the performance itself fits Cleopatra's political style. She understood that royalty had to be seen. Egyptian and Hellenistic monarchy used ceremony to transform authority into something sacred. Cleopatra did not merely attend a meeting. She created an event that placed Antony inside her world. Tarsus was the beginning of one of history's most famous partnerships. But once again, romance should not hide politics. Antony controlled Rome's eastern territories. Cleopatra controlled Egypt's treasury, grain, fleet, and strategic position. He needed resources. She needed protection and the restoration of lands once held by the Ptolemaic kingdom. Each possessed something the other lacked. Cleopatra also used a meeting to remove enemies. Her sister Arsinoe had survived the Alexandrian War and been sent to live at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. Although technically under religious protection, Arsinoe remained a possible rival claimant. At Cleopatra's request, Antony ordered her execution. The decision was ruthless. But Ptolemaic royal politics had always been ruthless. Cleopatra had been expelled by her brother. Her sister had taken up arms against her. Her father had executed Berenice. Dynastic survival rarely allowed mercy. Antony spent the winter of 41 to 40 BCE in Alexandria. Later writers described feasts, games, disguises, drinking, and extravagant entertainment. Some of these tales may preserve real memories. Others may reflect hostile propaganda. What is certain is that Antony and Cleopatra formed a close personal and political bond. In 40 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, a son named Alexander Helios, and a daughter named Cleopatra Selene. Their names connected them to the sun and moon. Antony then returned west. Roman politics required him elsewhere. His relationship with Octavian was unstable. To repair their alliance, Antony married Octavian's sister, Octavia. She was respected in Rome and appears to have treated Antony's existing children with dignity. For several years, Antony remained separated from Cleopatra. During this period, Cleopatra continued governing Egypt. Her reign was not a long interruption between famous Roman lovers. She administered a kingdom. She issued coins, managed religious and political relationships, protected agricultural production, and presented herself in both Greek and Egyptian forms. On her coins, Cleopatra did not appear as the soft, idealized beauty of later paintings. She wore the royal diadem. Her features were strong. Her image communicated authority and legitimacy. Coins were political objects. They traveled through markets, ports, armies, and tax offices. Cleopatra used them to remind the kingdom that the ruler of Egypt was a queen in her own right. She also identified herself with the goddess Isis. This association was politically powerful. Isis was connected with motherhood, kingship, protection, and sacred authority. Cleopatra, ruling beside the young Caesarion, could present herself as a divine mother protecting a royal son. The image blended Egyptian religion with dynastic politics. In 37 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra were reunited at Antioch. By then, Antony needed Egyptian support for a major campaign against the Parthian Empire. Cleopatra gained significant territorial concessions. Regions in the eastern Mediterranean and Near East were placed under her control or influence, expanding Egypt's access to valuable resources and trade. The arrangement did not restore the Ptolemaic Empire at its ancient height, but increased Cleopatra's wealth and regional authority. Their alliance had entered a new phase. It was no longer a temporary relationship. It was becoming the foundation of an Eastern political system. Cleopatra gave birth to another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Antony now had 3 children with the Egyptian queen. But his military ambitions did not proceed as planned. In 36 BCE, Antony launched his Parthian campaign. It became a costly failure. Supply problems, difficult terrain, enemy attacks, and the loss of equipment forced a painful retreat. Thousands of men died. Antony's reputation suffered. Cleopatra provided support during the aftermath. Her resources became even more important. In 34 BCE, Antony invaded Armenia. This campaign was more successful. The Armenian king was captured, and Antony returned to Alexandria. Instead of celebrating a formal Roman triumph in Rome, he staged an elaborate victory ceremony in Egypt. Soon afterward came the event known as the Donations of Alexandria. Before a large public audience, Cleopatra was proclaimed Queen of Kings. Caesarion was proclaimed King of Kings. The children of Cleopatra and Antony received titles over various eastern territories. Some of these lands were not actually under their secure control. The ceremony was therefore partly a declaration of ambition. It presented Alexandria as the center of a new dynasty. A dynasty joining Roman military power, Ptolemaic kingship, and the children of Cleopatra. To the people gathered in Alexandria, it must have appeared magnificent. To Octavian in Rome, it was a political weapon waiting to be used. Relations between Antony and Octavian had deteriorated. The Roman world was moving toward another civil war. Octavian portrayed Antony as a Roman commander who had abandoned his identity. According to this story, Antony was no longer governed by Roman duty. He had become the servant of a foreign queen. Cleopatra was described as dangerous, luxurious, immoral, and ambitious. She was accused of seeking to rule Rome. The conflict was deliberately presented not simply as a struggle between 2 Roman leaders, but as a war between Rome and Egypt. This framing was useful. Many Romans had served Antony and respected him. It was easier to unite them against Cleopatra. Her gender made the propaganda more powerful. A Roman man who lost control of himself to a foreign woman could be presented as weak and dishonored. A queen who exercised power could be transformed into a witch, seductress, or monster. Octavian's message was clear. He was defending Rome. Antony was betraying it. Cleopatra was invading it through him. The reality was more complicated. Antony still commanded Roman armies. Many Roman senators joined him. His political headquarters moved east because that was where his resources and military strategy were concentrated. Cleopatra was essential to the alliance, but she did not magically control Antony. They were partners whose interests had become deeply connected. Antony needed Egypt. Cleopatra needed Antony. Both underestimated Octavian. By 32 BCE, the final break had come. Antony formally separated from Octavia. Octavian intensified his political campaign. Rome declared war on Cleopatra. This was not accidental. By declaring war on the Egyptian queen rather than openly announcing another Roman civil war, Octavian made his cause appear national. In reality, Romans would fight Romans once again. Antony and Cleopatra gathered their forces in Greece. Their fleet was large, but Octavian's admiral, Marcus Agrippa, was an experienced and highly effective naval commander. Agrippa captured important positions and disrupted Antony's supply lines. Disease spread through the camp. Desertions increased. The alliance's strategic position weakened before the decisive battle began. On September 2nd, 31 BCE, the fleets met near Actium on the western coast of Greece. The battle has often been told as a simple tale of cowardice. Cleopatra fled. Antony abandoned his men to follow her. But the reality remains debated. Their ships may have been attempting to break through Octavian's blockade and preserve part of the fleet and treasury for a continued war. What is known is that Cleopatra's squadron passed through an opening and sailed south. Antony followed. Many of the remaining ships were captured or surrendered. Actium was not the immediate destruction of every force Antony and Cleopatra possessed, but it destroyed confidence. Allies changed sides. Armies defected. Octavian gained control of the Roman world. Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt. For nearly a year, they tried to prepare for the final invasion. Cleopatra explored possible negotiations. She considered ways to preserve the throne for her children. There may have been plans to send Caesar Ion eastward. There may also have been attempts to move ships across land toward the Red Sea. The details are incomplete. But Cleopatra had not yet surrendered. Alexandria became a city waiting for its end. In 30 BCE, Octavian entered Egypt. Antony attempted to resist. Some of his forces deserted. His remaining position collapsed. Then came the final tragedy. Antony received a false report that Cleopatra was dead. Believing he had lost her, he stabbed himself. The wound did not kill him immediately. He was brought to the building where Cleopatra had taken refuge. Ancient accounts describe him being raised through an upper window because the entrance had been sealed. There, wounded and dying, Antony was reunited with Cleopatra. He died in her presence. The scene has been retold for centuries. It is difficult to separate exact fact from later drama. But Antony's death ended the last serious military resistance. Cleopatra now faced Octavian alone. She was 39 years old. She had ruled Egypt for more than 2 decades. She had known exile, civil war, motherhood, wealth, military danger, political victory, and defeat. She had negotiated with Caesar, built a dynasty with Antony, and watched both men die before her. Octavian wanted Cleopatra alive. A captured foreign queen would be the greatest prize in his victory procession through Rome. Roman triumphs displayed defeated kings, commanders, treasures, and symbols of conquered nations. Cleopatra understood what awaited her. She would be carried through the streets as evidence of Octavian's greatness. The queen who would present herself as Isis and Queen of Kings would become a chained spectacle. After the triumph, her fate will remain in Octavian's hands. Cleopatra attempted to negotiate. She wanted to preserve something for her children. But she appears to have realized that Octavian would not allow Caesarion to remain king of Egypt. Caesarion's existence was especially dangerous. Octavian authority rested heavily on being Julius Caesar's adopted son and heir, a biological son of Caesar, even one whose paternity was not formally recognized in Roman law, could become a rival symbol. In August of 30 BCE, Cleopatra died by suicide. The traditional story says that an ASP was hidden inside a basket of figs and allowed to bite her. The exact method is unknown. Some ancient accounts mentioned a snake. Others suggested poison. Modern historians cannot determine the answer with certainty. Cleopatra may have used a prepared toxin. She may have used a snake. The enduring image of the ASP belongs as much to legend and art as to confirmed history. What matters is that Cleopatra chose the manner of her death. She denied Octavian the living captive he wanted. 2 of her attendants reportedly died with her. When Octavian's men entered, the queen was already beyond his control. Even in defeat, she made one final political decision. Caesarion did not survive for long. He was captured and killed on Octavian's orders. The Ptolemaic male line ended with him. Cleopatra's children by Antony were taken to Rome. They were placed in the household of Octavia, Antony's Roman wife. Her daughter, Cleopatra Selene, survived and later became queen of Mauritania in North Africa. Through Selene, something of Cleopatra's dynasty continued beyond Egypt. But Egypt itself was transformed. Octavian annexed the kingdom. It became a Roman possession governed under his authority. Its enormous grain supply and royal treasury strengthened his position. In 27 BC, Octavian received the title Augustus. The Roman Republic, though still preserved in official language and institutions, had entered the age of emperors. Cleopatra's defeat therefore marked more than the end of one queen. It marked the end of the Ptolemaic kingdom, the end of independent pharaonic rule, and the beginning of Roman imperial control over Egypt. Octavian celebrated his victory carefully. He presented himself as a man who had saved Rome from a foreign threat. Antony's role was reduced. Cleopatra became the central enemy. This propaganda survived because the victors controlled the story. Later Roman writers inherited a world ruled by Augustus and his successors. Their Cleopatra was often excessive, immoral, manipulative, and destructive. She became the woman who used desire to weaken great men. This image was repeated in poetry, history, theater, painting, opera, and film. It was powerful because it turned a complicated political conflict into a simple moral story. Rome represented discipline. Cleopatra represented temptation. Octavian represented order. Cleopatra represented dangerous luxury. But contemporary evidence gives us another image. On her coins, Cleopatra appears as a monarch. She wears the royal diadem. She presents herself with strong features associated with dynastic authority. In Egyptian temples, she appears as a pharaoh. In official titles, she is a goddess-loving queen and mother of a king. These images do not show a woman waiting to be rescued by Roman men. They show a ruler. Cleopatra's relationships with Caesar and Antony were real. They were personal. They produced children. They may also have involved genuine affection. But they were inseparable from politics. Caesar helped restore her throne. She offered him a stable and wealthy Egypt. Antony helped expand her territory. She financed and supplied his Eastern ambitions. Neither relationship can be understood as romance alone. Cleopatra was not simply charmed by Rome, nor did she control Rome through charm. She negotiated with power because the survival of her kingdom required it. Her greatest success was that she kept Egypt independent as long as she did. When she inherited the throne, Rome was already the dominant Mediterranean force. Her father had depended on Roman money and soldiers. Her brother's advisors had tried to win Caesar's favor by murdering Pompey. Every path to the throne passed through Roman politics. Cleopatra could not remove Rome from Egypt's future. She could only try to manage it. For many years, she succeeded. She survived the fall of Pompey, the assassination of Caesar, the defeat of Caesar's killers, the division of the Roman world, Antony's failed Parthian campaign, and the growing power of Octavian. She restored territories, stabilized her dynasty, placed Caesarion beside her, and made Alexandria the center of a powerful Eastern court. But her strategy contained a fatal weakness. Egypt's security became tied to individual Roman leaders. First Caesar, then Antony. When they fell, Cleopatra's position fell with them. There was no independent Egyptian army capable of defeating the unified forces of Octavian. There was no third Roman alliance left to pursue. By the time of Actium, Cleopatra and Antony either had to win or lose everything. They lost. Was Cleopatra beautiful? We do not know in the way later generations wanted to know. The surviving portraits are uncertain. Coins were designed to communicate authority rather than physical realism. Ancient descriptions emphasize her intelligence, voice, and personality more than perfect appearance. The obsession with her beauty may reveal more about later societies than it reveals about Cleopatra herself. A powerful woman was easier to explain as a seductress than as a strategist. If Caesar and Antony valued her, later writers assumed she must have enchanted them. The possibility that they respected her political usefulness, intelligence, wealth, and royal authority was less convenient. Cleopatra has therefore lived two lives. The first was her real life. A queen of the 1st century BC. A Ptolemaic monarch ruling from Alexandria. A mother protecting a dynasty. A politician navigating Roman civil wars. The second life began after her death. Cleopatra the myth. The exotic queen. The perfect beauty. The dangerous lover. The tragic suicide. The woman whose presence destroyed powerful men. The myth has often hidden the ruler, but it has also preserved her name. Ptolemy XIII is remembered because he opposed her. Ptolemy XIV is remembered because he ruled beside her. Caesarion is remembered because he was her son. Antony remains one of Rome's most famous commanders partly because his fate became joined with hers. Even Octavian's rise is inseparable from the queen he defeated. He won the war. But Cleopatra conquered memory. Her kingdom disappeared. Her palace sank beneath centuries of earthquakes and changing seas. Her tomb has never been identified with certainty. Much of Alexandria's royal city lies beneath modern buildings or Mediterranean water. Yet Cleopatra remains present. In coins, temple reliefs, ancient texts, paintings, plays, films, and in every new attempt to separate the woman from the legend. She was not the last Egyptian ruler, because Egypt disappeared after her. Egypt survived. Its people, language, temples, fields, and traditions continued under Roman rule. But Cleopatra was the last ruler the dynasty created after Alexander the Great. She was the last pharaoh to govern Egypt as an independent monarch. After her, the country answered to Rome. Her death closed one historical age. The Hellenistic kingdoms created from Alexander's conquests had gradually fallen. Macedonia, the Seleucid realm, Pergamon, and finally Egypt. Rome stood over the Mediterranean. The age of Augustus had begun. This is why Cleopatra's life feels larger than a royal biography. She stood at the border between worlds. Behind her stood 3,000 years of Egyptian kingship. Around her stood Greek language and Hellenistic court culture. Before her stood Rome. She tried to combine these worlds into something that could survive. A dynasty led by Cleopatra and Caesarion. An Eastern alliance supported by Antony. A kingdom powerful enough to negotiate with Rome rather than submit to it. For a moment, that future seemed possible. Alexandria was wealthy. Egypt was fertile. Antony commanded Roman forces. Cleopatra possessed a royal line, a treasury, a fleet, and children who connected several traditions of power. Then Actium ended the possibility. Cleopatra did not fall because she lacked intelligence. She fell because she confronted an opponent who combined military strength, political patience, propaganda, and the resources of the Roman West. Octavian was not as theatrical as Antony. He was not as experienced as Caesar when Cleopatra first met him. But he was disciplined. He understood institutions. He allowed others, especially Agrippa, to command effectively. He turned Cleopatra into the symbol Rome needed to unite against her. And after victory, he ensured that no rival dynasty remained in Egypt. Cleopatra's final act was therefore both personal and political. She had lost Antony, lost her kingdom, and failed to preserve the throne for Caesarion. But she still controlled one thing: whether Octavian would display her alive. She chose not to give him that victory. The queen who had entered Caesar's palace in secret left history on her own terms. Not completely. No ruler controls how future generations will remember them. Octavian shaped much of her reputation. Roman writers added moral judgment. Poets and artists added beauty, luxury, snakes, and tragedy. But beneath these layers, the real Cleopatra can still be seen. A young queen driven from her capital who returned. A ruler who learned the languages and symbols of her kingdom. A monarch who survived one Roman civil war after another. A mother trying to create a future for her children. A politician who understood that ceremony could become power. A woman whose enemies reduced her to seduction because admitting her political skill would make her more threatening. Cleopatra did not charm two empires into obedience. She did something more difficult. She persuaded two of Rome's greatest commanders that Egypt and its queen were essential to their ambitions. For years, they were right. Caesar needed Egypt's stability. Antony needed its wealth and strategic position. Cleopatra used both alliances to preserve her throne. But Rome's internal wars eventually produced a single victor. And a single Roman victor had no reason to tolerate an independent queen controlling the richest kingdom in the Eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra's tragedy was not that she loved too deeply. It was that Egypt's survival depended on a Roman world that was becoming impossible to balance. When Caesar lived, she stood with Caesar. When Antony controlled the East, she built a future with Antony. When Octavian defeated them both, there was nowhere else to turn. And so, in the final silence at Alexandria, Cleopatra's reign came to an end. The woman died. The kingdom fell. The legend began. More than 2,000 years later, Cleopatra remains one of history's most recognizable names. Not because we know everything about her, but because so much remains hidden. We do not know the identity of her mother with certainty. We do not know exactly what she looked like. We do not know every language she spoke. We do not know the full nature of her relationships with Caesar and Antony. We do not know exactly how she died. We do not know where she was buried. But uncertainty has not weakened her memory. It has made the mystery stronger. Cleopatra became a mirror in which later generations saw their own fears and desires. To Rome, she was a dangerous foreign queen. To Renaissance artists, she was tragic beauty. To dramatists, she was passion. To modern historians, she is increasingly recognized as a capable monarch whose life was distorted by the propaganda of her enemies. Perhaps the closest we can come to the real Cleopatra is to remember what she was trying to do. She was trying to keep Egypt alive, not as a province, not as a treasure house for Rome, but as a kingdom ruled from Alexandria by her family. She failed, yet she delayed the end for nearly 22 years. She forced Rome's greatest men to negotiate with her. She placed Egypt at the center of Roman politics. And when defeat became unavoidable, she denied Rome the final spectacle of her humiliation. Cleopatra was not only the queen who captivated Caesar and Antony. She was a ruler who challenged the future Emperor Augustus, the last guardian of a dynasty nearly 3 centuries old, and the final monarch of an Egypt that had not yet become Roman. When the sun rose over Alexandria after her death, the city still stood. Ships still entered the harbor. The Nile continued northward. Priests continued their rituals. Farmers continued working the dark soil beside the river. Ordinary life continued. But the ancient kingdom had ended. The crowns of Egypt belonged to history. The royal palace was silent. Caesarion was dead. Octavian controlled the treasury. And Rome possessed a land that had once belonged to the pharaohs. Somewhere within that silence, Cleopatra passed from ruler into memory. Her enemies had defeated her body. They had conquered her kingdom. But they could not make the world forget her. And perhaps that became her final victory.